Got it. But how do things like stress and anxiety play into all of this? For example, is the trauma of this pandemic impacting our microbiome? And in closing, what exactly is the best dietary approach to optimizing the microbiome and microbiome health? Hint, think plant diversity. To close out today's deep dive, let's hear from my buddy, Dr. Will Bulsiewicz, a lauded gastroenterologist, gut health guru, and author of the must-read Fiber Fueled. So many things to talk about. I think an interesting launching off point for this would be to kind of contextualize your work with what's going on currently in this pandemic era that we're all navigating through. And what I've been thinking about lately, and I'm interested in your thoughts on, is how we square this, need to socially distance and sanitize our environments and kind of cloister ourselves from other human beings and restrict our exposure to a variety of environments with this paramount need to increase our biodiversity, not just with the foods that we're eating, but with the environments that we visit and the people that we interact with. Like, these two things are at odds, this importance of biodiversity, maximizing that, with this need to kind of over-cleanse everything at the moment.
Yeah. I feel like gut health has never been as important as it is right now. There is a direct connection between your gut microbiome and the strength of your immune system. And for that reason, it becomes imperative that we take care and nurture a healthy gut microbiome. And the thing that sort of stands out to me, Rich, is yes, like excessive cleanliness, sterilizing our environment, not being allowed to socialize and connect with other humans, like all those things are there. But to me, the most powerful influence is the stress. The stress is something that is affecting all of us. I mean, we are living through a moment of collective stress. We're all forced to take this on. There's no avoiding it. And that actually has an impact on our gut microbiome. And it drives us to this place where we all sort of have different ways that we cope and deal with that stress. And for many, it's to turn to unhealthy habits. And that includes unhealthy food and, in many cases, alcohol. And we're compounding that stress, and we're actually compounding the harm that it does to our gut microbiome. Many people, when we think about gut health, we talk about food, and like my book discusses food in great detail. The part of the book that I really wanted to elaborate on, and there just weren't enough pages for me to go there, is the effect of trauma. The most challenging patients that I see as a gastroenterologist are the people who have been victims of physical, emotional, sexual, psychological trauma. And it changes them, and they don't realize the way that it affects their gut. And typically when they get to me, I'm the 5th or 6th doctor gastroenterologist that they've been to. They're looking for solutions related to their gut microbiome or to their digestive issues. And what I discover after getting to know them and building that trust and that relationship is that the solution, the path, is actually not through food. More so, it's actually about healing that trauma that is eating at them on a subconscious level. And all of us are dealing with trauma right now. And I feel like collectively, this is affecting our gut microbiome, and it's at the worst possible time. There's a direct line between gut health and our immune system. 70% of our immune system lives in our gut. And when we have that, that emotional trauma that's affecting our gut, and then we also compound that by consuming alcohol or by eating junk food, we're putting ourselves into a vulnerable place where if we do get the virus, we don't have our defense system built up to protect us. And that's the scary thing, because increasingly we're seeing studies, Rich, that are making connections between the gut microbiome and severe manifestations of COVID-19. I mean, the doctors are all asking the question, who are these people that get COVID-19? And one of the first things that we discovered is it's the people who are that have diabetes and high blood pressure and coronary artery disease and are overweight. And then when you think about all of those things that I just mentioned, diabetes, heart disease, high blood pressure, being overweight, they're all connected back to the microbiome.
Mm-hmm. So essentially, to ignore gut health or to not have a optimally functioning microbiome is to put yourself at peril in terms of your immune response to COVID or anything.
I feel like this connection is critically important in the 21st century period. I mean, look at the explosion of immune-mediated disease states. Look at celiac disease up 500% in the last 50 years. Look at inflammatory bowel disease that's absolutely exploding.
Mm-hmm.
And, there's conditions, Rich, that when I was a kid literally didn't exist, that I'm diagnosing sometimes twice in the same day that are immune-mediated. Things like eosinophilic esophagitis. And so independent of COVID,
right.
I feel like recognizing this connection is really critically important, because the problem is once you trip that wire, once you cross that line, you may find yourself with one of these conditions that I don't believe that there's necessarily a cure. I think that you can put yourself into remission. But once you have one of these conditions, I think that you have it and it's there.
Mm-hmm. In terms of the protocols that we should all be undertaking to, buttress our microbiome, you're not necessarily advising a specific type of diet other than to say plant diversity is king. Like, this is the vector of all vectors for you, right? So it's not about, it's vegan it's a predominantly plant-based or plant-based diet, but the diversity of plants is really what's important in terms of making sure that you're doing everything you can in the interest of your microbiome.
Well, I think the critical piece to me, so, the book is called Fiber Fueled, and that's because I feel like fiber has been this ignored superfood. And part of it is that we've been thinking about it as this orange drink that grandma stirs up so that she can poop.
Mm-hmm.
When in fact, it's incredible, the connection between fiber and our gut microbiome. Fiber doesn't just go in the mouth and shoot out the other end. Soluble fiber is a specific sort of general category which feeds the microbiome. This is their preferred food. When we give this to them, they consume it. They grow stronger. Our microbes actually multiply, grow stronger. And then they turn around and they reward us. And the way that they reward us is by releasing short-chain fatty acids. And these short-chain fatty acids have healing effects throughout the entire body. So, we've been emphasizing a little bit the immune system. Short-chain fatty acids optimize our immune system. There are studies that we could talk about if you want to, connecting short-chain fatty acids in terms of protection from respiratory viruses. They can have their effect in the lungs on the immune system. Short-chain fatty acids reverse leaky gut, which is, dysbiosis. That is the root cause of these digestive issues that I take care of on a daily basis.
Mm-hmm.
They directly prevent colon cancer. They lower our cholesterol. They prevent and reverse insulin resistance, which is type 2 diabetes. They travel throughout the entire body, having their healing effects. We think that they can actually reverse coronary artery disease. We think that they can actually repair the blood-brain barrier for people that have brain fog. They actually travel into the brain through the blood-brain barrier, and they have their effect. They affect our mood, our memory. They affect, believe it or not, we have studies that suggest that they prevent Alzheimer's disease. These are incredibly powerful. And the way that you get them is through the consumption of fiber in your diet. And here's the problem. 97% of Americans are not getting an adequate amount of fiber in their diet. And that's creating issues for us.
Everybody's worried about their protein intake, but they don't give a second thought to their fiber intake. 97% of people are fiber deficient. That's a shocking statistic.
And that's with low standards. The expectation or the standard that we're holding is 25 grams for women and 38 grams for men.
Mm-hmm.
And the average American is somewhere in the 15 to 18 gram range. And, Rich, let me ask you a question. I'm just curious. So I know you eat a very healthy diet. If you had to estimate in a given week, how many plants do you think you have in your diet? Give me a general idea.
It's going to be higher than most, but it can't be more than, 30, 40.
Okay. And I would challenge the people listening at home right now. Like if you have to hit the pause button, take a minute and think about how many plants you actually have in your diet. Okay. So most Americans are definitely less than 30. The majority are around 15 to 20.
Mm-hmm.
There are literally 300,000 edible plants on the planet. The problem is that we've narrowed it down to the point where 75% of our diet is from 3 of them.
Mm-hmm.
And we're ignoring this diversity. We've put pressure, unfortunately, on our farmers where the farmer has no choice but to opt for high yield breeds of crops. We are narrowing down the biodiversity within our diet through our food systems.
Right.
If there's only one thing that you take away from this podcast, listening to us have this conversation today, this is what I want you guys to hear. Okay. The way that it works is this. Fiber is not just fiber. There are millions, if not billions, of types of fiber in nature. It's so incredibly complicated from a chemistry perspective that we're not even capable of creating an estimate to how many types of fiber there are. But every single plant has its own unique types of fiber, multiple different types within that plant. Every single plant is going to have prebiotic fiber that feeds the microbiome. This is their preferred food, these prebiotic fibers. And the key is that they are picky eaters. They're like us. You have different food preferences than I do. Mm-hmm. Even though I'm sure that many people would label us as having the same diet, you eat differently than I do. We have our own preferences. And they do too. They have specific food preferences in terms of the different types of fiber. To put in perspective, take a black bean. You give these microbes a black bean, and there are certain specific species that are going to multiply and thrive, and they're going to be stronger and be more prepared to help you because you just fed them. They are energized. But the opposite is true. You take that black bean away, you say, I'm going black bean free. Those same microbes that were thriving because you were feeding them are starving.
Right.
And they're not getting what they need. And so the point is we want as much diversity as possible. Mm-hmm. And that's the critical piece.
Eating as many different things as possible and getting out of your comfort zone a little bit. And I think what you're saying essentially is that the more that you're in the practice of doing that, it's almost like an insurance policy that you're taking out for your gut health. You're seeding your gut with the biota that will then ultimately be able to grow and thrive the more that you're feeding it those types of plants.
Yeah. Every single plant has its own unique types of fiber. That's what I've been talking about for the last few minutes.
Uh-huh.
But there's so much more. Every single plant has vitamins, minerals, phytochemicals. These are the unique chemicals that you will find in plant foods, exclusive to plant foods. That's what phyto means. There's at least 8,000 of them. Very few of them have we actually studied. An example of one is resveratrol. So you hear about resveratrol, it's resveratrol is capable of actually changing the microbiome by itself. David Sinclair in Lifespan talks about resveratrol and its benefits for healthy aging. And this is just one example of one phytochemical that you'll find in these plants. And the other thing, by the way, that's kind of interesting, most people don't realize this. The plants have a microbiome of their own. Every single life on this planet either has a microbiome or is a part of the microbiome. And depending on how you choose to zoom out, you could almost make the argument that us humans are part of a larger microbiome in a way, right? Which is planetary health and the way that it all functions. But these plants have their own microbiome. If you take an apple, for example, because we have a study that shows this, the apple has a microbiome that is there from the seed, from like literally the seed through the flower and all the way through to the fruit. And that microbiome is dynamically evolving and changing and helping this transformational process to occur. And the apple has literally over 1,000 species of microbes, more than us humans do. Mm. And potentially 100 million microbes. Mm. When you eat an apple, you're getting the fiber, you're getting the phytochemicals, of which there are many, you're getting the vitamins and the minerals, and you're even getting the microbiome that the apple contains.
Right. Wow.
And so each plant has a story like that. Each plant has something positive that it wants to bring to your health. Every single one wants to bring something to your health.
Yeah. And what's interesting about the work that you do is that it's not about reducing certain things. You're talking about what you're building it, like what you're at. It's very additive. Like this whole diversification of your diet is about building new things into your diet as opposed to focusing on what we're removing.
I feel like it's easily applicable, but conceptually extremely sound. Like from my perspective, 50 years from now, this is still going to be the best way to eat, to consume a broad variety of plants, to be as predominantly plant-based as possible. You know, and I wrote the book, Rich, to meet people where they are. So, you know, when you say, well, you're not rigidly adherent to any particular diet, I want people to be 90 to 100% plant-based. That's what we find in the blue zones. That's what I think from a nutritional perspective is the highest quality diet. And I do think that when people get to be 90% plant-based, they're going to feel so good, they're going to want to keep going. But I also think that there's an argument that goes beyond nutrition and talks about the health of our planet and talks about, you know, the compassion for these animals. And I think that those should be a part of the conversation. Even if they are not directly human nutrition, I think that COVID-19 has taught us that when we abuse this planet, when we abuse these animals, I kind of feel like it's going to fight back.
It's beautifully put. And that just speaks to the interrelationship of everything. You can't talk about the microbiome without referencing the macrobiome. The health of our gut is related to the health of the planet and vice versa.
The soil health connects to human health. You know, the health of our soil, which is the source of our nutrients, is critically important to human populations moving forward. I have children, and I am scared of what this planet looks like 100 years from now when you consider what it looks like today compared to 1920. And the reality is that we need to just look at population. Right now, we have 7 billion people. In 2050, we will have 10 billion people. Consider that in 1900, there were only 2 billion people. Consider that in 1800, there was only 1 billion people. We're going to have 10 times the population in 250 years. And that's putting a strain on the environment, on our planet, a strain on these animals. Biodiversity is the word. It's critical to our gut health. It's critical to planetary health, and it needs to be upheld.